Few fictional characters have left such a chilling mark on cinema and television as Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Now, he's a cultured psychiatrist, brilliant mind, and a cannibalistic killer. Over the decades, Lecter has been portrayed in multiple adaptations, each revealing a different facet of his dark genius. Welcome to Check That Book, a special place on YouTube where we get acquainted with arguably the most disturbing books ever written, and today we're going to take a look at a film adaptation of not one, not two, but 4 books. This is going to be even bigger than my video on the Millennium Trilogy, which I love. You can obviously take a look at it. The video will be in the description. No problem. I love talking about books and film adaptations, that especially if they are successful. In this, dare I call it a franchise? Well, it's not quite, but in these film series and books by Thomas Harris, some adaptations were a bit more successful than the others. And of course, towards the end, I will treat you to the TV series and talk a wee bit about those too, because let's face it, Mads Mikkelsen created a brand new Hannibal Lecter with a hint of what Sir Anthony Hopkins has given us. And, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's begin at the beginning. But before we begin at the beginning, we should take a look at all of the adaptations in the order of their appearance. Now, why do I feel like we need to do this? First and foremost, because otherwise it will be a bit confusing. The first time Dr. Hannibal Lecter appeared on screen was actually in a film called Manhunter, released in 1986. Directed by Michael Mann and based on Thomas Harris's novel Red Dragon, the film introduced Lecter under a slightly different name, Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Played by Brian Cox, this version is sharp, restrained, and eerily calm. A prototype of what was to come. While Manhunter wasn't a box office hit at the time, it would later be recognized as a stylish cult classic and the first glimpse into the mind of cinema's most sophisticated monster. 5 years later, Hannibal Lecter returned, this time in The Silence of the Lambs, directed by Jonathan Demme. Sir Anthony Hopkins took on the role, transforming it into an unforgettable performance that redefined psychological horror. Hopkins's Lecter is both charming and terrifying, which we will speak about a bit later, a monster with impeccable manners. Remarkably, Hopkins is on screen for only about 16 minutes in the entire film. Yet his commanding presence dominates every frame, proof of just how powerful his performance truly was. The film itself became a cinematic landmark, one of the very few in history to win all 5 major Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It's not just a thriller, it is a masterclass in tension, silence, pun intended, and psychological manipulation. A whole decade later, Ridley Scott directed Hannibal, the 2001 sequel that, of course, brought Hopkins back to the role. Here, Lecter is no longer behind bars. He's a free man living among Europe's elite until his past catches up with him. Julianne Moore however, replaced Jodie Foster as FBI agent Clarice Starling, and the film leaned more heavily into gothic horror and grand, even somewhat operatic visuals. The next year saw a return to the beginning of the story with Red Dragon, a prequel, if you will, directed by Brett Ratner. Hopkins once again reprised the role of Lecter, this time facing off against Edward Norton's FBI profiler, Will Graham. Yes, we will talk about the pair of them later. This film, however, revisited the same story first told in Manhunter, but with a different tone, darker and more faithful to the novel. In 2007, audiences saw where it all began with Hannibal Rising, directed by Peter Weber. This prequel, a true prequel, based on Thomas Harris's novel, of course, of the same name, starred Gaspar Ulliel as a young Hannibal Lecter, who, in my not-so-humble opinion, gave a very, very chilling performance. This film traced Hannibal's transformation from a traumatized boy in a war-torn Europe to the sophisticated killer we know. Though it offered insight into his origins, many critics felt that explaining the monster somehow diminished his mystery. We shall discuss this a wee bit later. And finally, in 2013, Hannibal Lecter found new life on television. NBC's Hannibal, created by Brian Fuller, starred Mads Mikkelsen as a bit younger, more enigmatic version of the Doctor. Set before the events of Red Dragon, are you still with me? The series explored the intense psychological relationship between Lecter and FBI investigator Will Graham. I promised we would speak about them again. Lavishly produced, artistically great, shockingly beautiful, the series became a cult phenomenon, praised for its visual elegance and deep exploration of the mind behind the monster. We are going to look at the story of Dr. Hannibal Lecter in appropriate chronological order. Then we shall start with a film called Hannibal Rising, which is based on the book Hannibal Rising of 2006. It got its adaptation quite soon, in 2007 already, whilst the timeline speaks about Hannibal Lecter's childhood and early adulthood, which is basically your origin story. Or in the world of cinema, it is a prequel, because obviously the other films are much older. So, Gaspar Ulliel, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, plays young Hannibal, and he delivers. By Jove, look at his facial expressions alone. Set in World War II era Lithuania and later France, this one explores Hannibal's traumatic childhood, his family, and basically the backstory of how he became what he is and what we all know him for today. Obviously, this goes without saying, but you know that I do give out a lot during these, especially during the movie moments. Another fun rubric on my channel, check it out. And during the book versus film videos, obviously there will be more spoilers than in an average video where I just speak about the book alone. I try my best not to spoil, but sometimes it's hard not to. And this is not an exception. Of course, if you haven't seen any of the Hannibal Lecter films, it sounds as if he made the films. Let me paraphrase. If you haven't seen any movies that tell the story of Dr. Lecter, then I suggest you check them out first. And don't start with the TV series, please. We'll get there, But don't start with the series with Mads Mikkelsen, because in order to understand properly, you should begin where I recommend you to, which honestly would be reading the book. Hannibal's family is killed by soldiers, and his sister Misha is cannibalized by starving war criminals. Now, if this is not a disturbing story in one's childhood, then I don't know what is. The adult Hannibal, brilliant and vengeful, hunts and kills those responsible, refining his murderous intellect and taste for flesh. The film is stylish and feels more revenge thriller than psychological horror, which the book originally was supposed to be. It even romanticizes Hannibal. Critics often found it weakened his mystique, the romanticizing part, I mean, because it explains the monster too much, and that supposedly diminishes his enigmatic horror. And whilst I kind of agree, I see where this is coming from, I still can't help but say that I do like this movie. It is a good backstory film, origin story film, and this cold demeanor and charisma of young Hannibal, I mean, it's haunting. Gaspard's performance, may he rest in peace, was, I think, 10 out of 10. So next one is Red Dragon, based on the book Red Dragon of 1981. And this one finally has, Sir Anthony Hopkins reprises his role as Hannibal Lecter, but it is in the world of cinema. Since I am going in chronological order, there you have it. The first major investigation involving Dr. Lecter. Now, we have an FBI profiler, Will Graham, who captures Hannibal Lecter, and Graham is pulled back to hunt a new serial killer who murders families, entire families. Graham must consult Dr. Lecter again, knowing the doctor's manipulative genius. Now, since we have Sir Anthony Hopkins reprising his role as Dr. Lecter, obviously the acting in the film is top-notch. As for the disturbing aspects, well, we have some sexualized violence against families, which is, again, bizarre and disturbing. They're ritualized and even fetishistic. We have Lecter's classical, subtle psychological cruelty. He is toying with Graham's sanity from his cell. And the blurred empathy between Graham and Lecter, two minds alike, separated only by conscience. To be fair, this is a good movie, with a not so good of a rating for some reason, compared to the other two I'm going to talk about. Yes, there will be an adaptation of this very story with Will Graham and Dr. Lecter. Now, from 2013 till 2015, we had TV series that were just called Hannibal. And, well, they were based on Red Dragon and parts of Hannibal and even Hannibal Rising, but mainly it focuses on the pair again, Will Graham and Dr. Lecter. There's nothing much to say besides the fact that Mads Mikkelsen obviously took notes while observing, most likely, Sir Anthony Hopkins, but he clearly made it his own character in a way, and I love that. I love the aspect of cooking. I love the names of each episodes. They are all interconnected. They're connected to menus. Wow, it's just such an eye candy, really, the whole series. They are it's the reimagining of the relationship between Graham and Lecter, of course with a modern twist, but nonetheless it's interesting to watch. I watched the entire series and I was pleased. It was an interesting take. Besides Lecter having an accent, Yes, yes, please. After all, from Hannibal Rising, we learned that he is actually, well, Lithuanian, so it only makes sense for him to have at least slight of an accent. Set even before Red Dragon, the show explores Lecter as an active, secret cannibal psychiatrist working with the FBI, fancy that, and eventually mentoring Will Graham. Across 3 seasons, it adapts Red Dragon's climax and Hannibal's emotional undertones, blending psychological thriller, surrealism, and even art horror. Again, there's a lot of artistic representation of murders, and this is so stylized that, again, much like with Hannibal Rising, it is beautiful to look at in a very twisted way. I mean, you understand what you're seeing, but you can't help but be amazed. And that is what we are here for. It is fascinating how one can get so immersed in a story and in the visuals of it that you no longer feel like you're a sick freak for watching this. After all, this is, dare I say, art. The show reinterprets the books with creative freedom, of course. It's less literal, more psychological, and even operatic. Will Graham's relationship with Lecter becomes the emotional core of the entire story here, and it's far beyond the book's scope. The dialogue often borrows directly from Harris, but transforms the meaning, which I find to be fascinating. Now, it is arguably the most philosophical and aesthetically pleasing version. Hannibal as Luciferian artist rather than a simple killer. Now, the most famous film adaptation, the one that received shit ton of Oscars, forgive my French, but Sir Anthony Hopkins hits the screens. Yes, he does, because he wasn't even there that much, but his few minutes on the screen basically made the movie. Yes, I am talking about The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. Now, people have been telling me weird stories about how they couldn't sit through the movie, how they walked out of movie theaters. Well, I imagine then back in the 90s it was much of a shock, actually, just like The Exorcist was a shocker in its time. But why is this such a good adaptation? Well, let's take a little look. Years after Lecter's imprisonment by Graham, we follow an FBI trainee, Clarice Starling, who seeks Lecter's insight in order to catch another killer, Buffalo Bill, who skins women to fashion himself a quote-unquote woman suit. Now, if that doesn't sound disturbing, what is wrong with you? Lecter psychologically dissects Clarice while manipulating events from within his cell. And, well, ultimately he escapes. In this one we witness Buffalo Bill's body horror, the skinning, the transformation theme, and the dance scene. Oh yes, it's been talked about. We also see Lecter's intimate invasions of Clarice's psyche. His probing empathy feels more violating than physical violence. And the elegant civility of Lecter. It's opposing the grotesque brutality, but you can't help but be somewhat enamored. In key dialogues, the film is extremely faithful to the source material, which I find endearing and appropriate. It gives some procedural texture here with the FBI and all of that, whilst it focuses also on the dynamics between Clarice and Lecter. It's not the main focus, it's not the core there, but it kind of is. That's where we can argue, like, which story is the is the key story? Is it the Buffalo Bills storyline? Is it Lecter and Clarice? Is it Clarice alone? We have a strong lead. We have a main character that is not only a strong trauma-surviving character, and by trauma I mean the death of her father. I mean, it's still a trauma which does haunt her. She's also a female, which was a big deal in the 90s, and it wasn't that easy to create a good movie with a female lead. But times have changed, and this change has begun in the 90s already. And it worked. You were worried for Clarice. You were worried about her. Never mind whether you're a man or a woman, you're still going to be worried about her. Now, what needs to be mentioned is Sir Anthony Hopkins's operatic theatricality. This one is absent from the book's quieter menace, of course, but in here, it makes Lecter more mythic rather than realistic. And it's not per se a bad thing. I adore this film. It is one of my favorite films of all time. It's on my list, on my special list. I sometimes rewatch it. It has great soundtrack, by the way, and overall the picture is very captivating. It's realistic despite what they tried to do with Lecter's character to make him a bit out of this world, a bit alien-esque even. But no, I somehow, because of how the film was made, I somehow felt that, like, yes, people like that must exist. Of course they do. I mean, look at this one there, because the surrounding atmosphere and the surrounding characters and everything is so realistic, you don't even doubt at some point. You don't doubt that characters and people such as Dr. Lecter actually exist in the real world. Roughly 10 years after The Silence of the Lambs, chronologically I mean, we have Hannibal. Just Hannibal. The adaptation came out in 2001, and Mr. Hopkins again took on the role of Dr. Lecter, a bit more vicious in this one because he is on the loose. Dr. Lecter is living in Florence as an art scholar. A grotesquely disfigured victim, Mason Verger, seeks revenge while Clarice's career is collapsing under political pressure. Their paths converge in an operatic, grotesque finale involving cannibalism and tragic obsession. Now, the book is far darker, actually, and more perverse, especially in its ending, in which Clarice joins Hannibal, psychologically reshaped into his companion. The film famously changes this, keeping Clarice morally intact, a move Harris disapproved of, but audiences accepted. The novel itself leans toward gothic romantic horror, whilst the film leans toward grand spectacle. The film itself felt like a theatrical performance to me, which wasn't a bad thing at all. Yes, the ending sucked. I mean, I too didn't like what they've done in the film, albeit there was a slight romantic moment there, but in the book, oh boy. Imagine the fan fiction, oh boy. But I digress. We also have this interesting, disturbing character of Mason Verger, who is explored more in the book, obviously, but he's portrayed magnificently and spookily by Gary Oldman. None other than Gary Oldman. Wow. Of course, you won't be able to recognize him, but yeah, spoiler alert, he is severely disfigured, distorted, mangled. And the story of how he turned out to be this way is disturbing indeed, and Dr. Lecter has something to do with it, but not in the way you might think. So if you haven't read or seen this film, you read the book or seen this film, just watch it, or read the book, or do both, and compare for yourself. I love this one. Mason Verger's character, he is also mentioned in the TV series, by the way, but the story there, as much as it was disturbing, it I think it doesn't give the Hannibal, the original film, a run for its money. Not in this case. The erotic undertone between Clarice and Hannibal, well, there's fascination, power play, control, and, well, decay of conscience. But not in the film. The film, it toys with the idea, I would say, but it doesn't go there. And the book does. And I wish it went even deeper because it's so, I don't know, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to learn that side of Dr. Lecter too. And ultimately Clarice is a wee bit of a weakness to him. He doesn't harm her. And in the film too. Instead he chooses to harm himself, and that places him on the pedestal of this extremely dangerous and violent person, but such a gentleman and noble at a heart. I hope you enjoyed this little review and introduction and slight comparison of Hannibal Lecter's story of the books and the film adaptations. And wow, which Hannibal, in your opinion, is the best? Who has done it better? I've been following this genre for a couple of decades now. Yes, I am older than I look. And Hannibal Lecter as a character is very dear to me. I've spoken about him in quite a few videos on this channel before. I think it was the reader's profile tag, yeah? And also, of course, I will link everything that's connected to this magnificent and mysterious, and at the same time, very chivalrous and noble character. Yet, like I said, a dangerous criminal. And I thank you all so much for watching this one. If you like unorthodox content, please consider giving this video a boost in the form of an erect thumb, and make sure to subscribe for more. Meanwhile, take good care of yourselves and your loved ones, ladies and gentlemen, and I shall see you all as soon as possible.